On the night of July 18th in the year 64, Rome began to burn. The first flames were remembered near the Circus Maximus, where shops, storage rooms, wooden fittings, oil, cloth, and packed streets gave a small urban fire the materials of catastrophe. The unresolved question was not simply whether Nero fiddled while Rome burned. The fiddle did not even belong to his world. The real question is harsher. How did a city built to rule the Mediterranean become so vulnerable that one night of flame could remake its politics, its streets, and its memory? Rome was marble in imperial imagination, but much of daily Rome was not marble at all. It was timber beams, market stalls, upper-floor apartments, cooking fire lamps, warehouses, awnings, workshops, and alleys crowded with people who rented more than they owned. Wealth and poverty stood near each other. Grand temples and elite houses existed beside insulae, the apartment blocks where ordinary residents climbed stairs into rooms that could fill with smoke before anyone understood the route down. A fire in such a city was never only a technical emergency. It was a test of who could escape, who could command, and who would be believed afterward. Tacitus, writing decades later, says the fire broke out in the part of the Circus Maximus that lay beside the Palatine and Caelian hills. That detail matters because the circus was not an empty monument. It was attached to commerce, storage, spectacle, and movement. Once flame entered that district, wind and slope could push it into neighborhoods where narrow lanes made rescue difficult. People trying to flee met people trying to salvage goods. Officials trying to clear passages met families refusing to abandon the last objects that proved a life had existed before the smoke. Ancient cities did have fire watchers and emergency practices, but scale changes everything. The Great Fire was not a hearth spilling sparks onto a floor. It became a moving front. Roofs caught, shop fronts collapsed, sparks leapt, smoke made familiar streets unreadable. Some residents fled toward open ground. Others ran back for children, tools, bedding, household gods, account tablets, or stored food. In the first hours, the fire was experienced as a human evacuation. Feet on stone, shouted names, doors forced open, animals loose, and the fear that the next turning might already be closed. Nero was at Antium, according to Tacitus, when the news reached him. That does not make him innocent of everything later charged to him, but it does complicate the simple cartoon. He returned to a capital in crisis and opened spaces for refugees, lowered the price of grain, and organized relief. Those measures are part of the record. They also show why disaster relief is political. A ruler who feeds and shelters people may gain legitimacy. A ruler suspected of profiting from their loss may lose it forever. In Rome, both stories grew at once. The fire burned for days, paused, and then flared again. Ancient numbers differ in detail, but the scale was enormous. Of Rome's 14 regions, only a few were left untouched, while others were destroyed or badly damaged. Temples, ancestral shrines, houses, shops, and apartment blocks disappeared. The damage was material, religious, and emotional. A family could lose its tools and rent money. A neighborhood could lose its shrine and memory. An elite could lose a house. A city could lose the failing that its order was permanent. Because the fire seemed too large for ordinary explanation, rumor rushed into the ruins. Some said men had hindered attempts to fight the flames. Some claimed they heard people invoke official authority while buildings burned. Suspicion fixed on Nero because cleared land later served his enormous palace complex, the Domus Aurea. Whether that suspicion proves guilt is another matter. What matters historically is that many Romans could imagine the emperor benefiting from catastrophe. Once that was possible, relief measures and rebuilding rules could not fully erase distrust. The most famous legend says Nero played music while Rome burned. The instrument is wrong and the image is too neat. But legends survive when they express a judgment people want to remember. The fiddle story says that Nero turned suffering into performance. Tacitus gives us a more difficult picture: relief, rumor, urban devastation, and then an attempt to redirect blame. According to his account, Nero fastened guilt on Christians, a small and disliked group in Rome. Their punishment became spectacle, and the fire entered Christian memory as persecution as well as Roman disaster. After the flames, rebuilding changed the city. New rules addressed street width, shared walls, exposed timber, access to water, and the materials used in construction. This is one reason the Great Fire should not be reduced to scandal. Catastrophe produced policy. It forced Romans to confront the built environment, how close buildings stood, how easily flame moved, how emergency access worked, and how poverty made risk unequal. Yet policy stood beside imperial display. The Domus Aurea made many ask whether Nero had rebuilt Rome for the public or for himself. Historians have to hold several truths together. Rome really suffered a vast urban disaster. Nero's government really undertook relief and rebuilding. Ancient authors also preserved deep suspicion, and some wrote under political conditions that encouraged blackening Nero's name. Archaeology, literary testimony, and urban history do not give us a single clean courtroom verdict. They give us a city where fire exposed the relationship between power and trust. That is why July 18th matters. The Great Fire of Rome began as flame in a crowded district, but it became a struggle over meaning. Was the emperor rescuer, arsonist, opportunist, or all too easy a villain for later memory? Were rebuilding rules proof of practical governance or a mask for imperial appetite? Why were Christians made useful as targets? The fire remade streets and reputations because disaster does not end when the smoke clears. It continues in relief lines, rebuilding contracts, accusations, monuments, and stories. Rome rose from the ashes, but the question of who owned those ashes never stopped burning.